Good day, everyone, or evening, whenever you find yourself viewing this particular video segment. I am Dr. Renee K. Harrison, Associate Professor of African American and U.S. Religious History at the Howard University. I'm so excited to be with you during this video discussion or segment or series as part of Join the Movement Towards Racial Justice. As we delve into this work, How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi. Are you ready to dig in? Because I'm ready to dig in. And I'm hoping on the other side of this and other conversations over the next few months, you will find a deeper meaning to yourself and what it means to be a racist or an anti-racist in these United States of America. Are you ready? Let's get started. We are going to move through chapters 1 through 6 during this first video segment. You see, in the first 6 chapters, Kendi essentially argues one is either racist or anti-racist. There is nothing in between. All of us at some point fall somewhere on this binary spectrum. And Kendi does something unique here. He provides his own definitions of racist and anti-racist. He essentially says that a racist is one who is supporting a racist policy through their actions or inaction or expressing a racist idea. That is, they are contributing to a history that regards and treats different races as inherently inferior. He goes on to say that an anti-racist is one who is supporting an anti-racist policy through their actions or expressing an anti-racist idea. An anti-racist is committed to dismantling that history. So I want to put this all in historical context because as I read through the first 6 chapters, what began to kind of push my thinking was how do we in 2023 take on this racist, anti-racist spectrum without acknowledging on a very deep and profound level that racism, however defined, must include centuries of internal cultural damage. That is, not only working on systems and structures, but also the ways in which those systems and structures have harmed the culture. And when I say that, I mean, that is the ways of living while Black for generations. I'm going to put this even more in historical context because Kendi, a 40-year-old Black man, was born on August 13th, 1982. And as he moves through the first 6 chapters, he alludes to the racist practices that he, his parents, to some degree, and other Americans, both Black and white, engaged in. And so as I moved with him on the racist to anti-racist spectrum, what became more apparent to me was what was missing. The violent and traumatic historical realities of racism are also crucial in this journey from racist to anti-racist. Such realities must be disclosed and contextualized in their full light before and beyond Kendi's memoir. We must take into deep consideration and reflection the pain and anguish, the harm and hardship, the downright trauma and righteous discontent that many Black and brown people are still experiencing and feeling because of unresolved racist acknowledgement and actions about power structures instituted by people in this country. We cannot gloss over this on our reflective journey to anti-racism. Racism is alive and well in this country. One only needs to look at the recent events in Tennessee where two Black lawmakers, one a Black man, one a Black Filipino man, were expelled by majority white GOP superpower for protesting gun violence after the fatal killing of 3 9-year-olds and 3 adults at an elementary school in Nashville, a Christian school in Nashville. Keep in mind that same GOP white power structure chose not to expel the one white female lawmaker that was a part of the protests. You see, we must take the past and the present in historical context and address the longevity of violence and trauma against and upon Black and brown peoples. And I'm going to put this even more historical context because I wanted us to take a look at on August 13, 1955, on the same day, 27 years before Kendi was born, Lamar Smith, a 63-year-old farmer and World War II or I veteran, was shot dead in cold blood on the crowded courthouse lawn in Brookhaven, Mississippi, for urging local African Americans to vote in a local runoff election. No one was prosecuted. And on September, 2 months later, a grand jury of 20 white men declined to convict the 3 suspects for murder. Smith's death did not happen in a vacuum. I'm going to say that again. Smith's death did not happen in a vacuum. And I'm going to come off screen because I want you to feel the next few words I'm about to offer as I talk about just a snippet of this violent reality that Black people have to face or have faced in this country from slavery to present. Smith's death did not happen in a vacuum. The racist policies instituted by racist people who were a part of a racist system made way for his death in 1955 and the subjugation of Kendi and Smith's forebears. Since the founding of this country, racist policies have been embedded in the hearts and minds of the early founders and immigrants, and therefore America's institutions. The stratification of race by early European settlers, most of whom were Christians, set up the conditions by which 11.9 to 12.5 million Black skin tone people, and some scholars estimate higher numbers than the numbers I've just offered. But these people were deemed inferior based on racialized constructions defined by white people. This stratification and the case for American slavery was solidified not only by the Hamite curse that Kendi points us to, but other biblical passages that Europeans used to justify their righteous practices. I'm going to give you some of those scriptures. You ready? Leviticus 25 and 44, Romans 13, 1 through 5, Titus 3 and 1, Titus 2 and 9, 1 Peter 2, 18, Colossians 3, 22, 1 Corinthians 7, 21 through 22, and Ephesians 6 and 5, just to name a few. It wasn't just the biblical text that they used, but it was also 2 papal bulls, that is, formal letters issued by the Pope, one called the Dum Diversis, written on June 18, 1452, and the Romius Pontifex, the bull written in 1455, that authorized King Alfonso of Portugal the right, hear these words, to invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue pagans and other enemies of Christ wheresoever placed, and to seize all kingdoms, dukedoms, principalities, dominions, possessions, and all movable and immovable goods, whatsoever held and possessed by these groups, and to reduce their persons to perpetual slavery. The Pope, the bull sanctioned by the church, issued by the Pope, made the enslavement of Black people permissible. This understanding of invasion, seizing, and reducing Black and brown bodies to perpetual slavery was and still is, in some cases, ingrained in the ethos of the United States of America. Even just moving from the Pope, President Jefferson Davis' statement sums it up best when he says slavery was established by Almighty God. It is sanctioned in the Bible, as the scriptures I just read, in both testaments from Genesis to Revelation, Jefferson Davis says. And then the Reverend Alexander Campbell, a prominent antebellum minister during slavery, put it best when he said, there is not one verse in the Bible inhibiting slavery, but many of the verses regulate the practice. Is it not then, Campbell says, that we conclude, immoral? The racialized stratification and subjugation of Black and brown bodies was not only a part of the ethos of the American church and also the church in Europe, but the seat of the U.S. government. 12 of the first 18 U.S. presidents, did you know this? Get ready. 12 of the first 18 U.S. presidents who served before the Reconstruction era. Let me give you those dates. Who served before 1789, starting with Washington himself, leading all the way up to 1877. That's a long time. 12 owned Black people, and most of them brought some of their enslaved Blacks with them to the White House. Black people's enslavement in America cannot be seen absent also of the centuries of lynchings and rape and breeding and other acts of violence. Post-slavery alone, Black people were seen as disposable, and the laws were in the hands of every white man. And in some cases, white women. In 1836, for example, 1 year after Chief Justice John Marshall's death, and let me emphasize here, just as the first 12 presidents were slave owners, so were the first justices. But after Marshall's death, Roger Brooke Taney became the Chief Justice. And when the Dred Scott decision reached the Supreme Court, the justices then ruled 7-10 against Scott. And Taney wrote in his majority opinion, finding neither Scott nor any other person of African descent, enslaved or free, were citizens. Black people, Taney ruled, were a subordinate and inferior class of beings and had no right or privileges but such as those granted by white people. Dred Scott died in 1858, merely 1 year after the Supreme Court's decision. So that is just a snippet of how the power structure ingrained in the early founding of this country, that Black people had no merit. So Smith's death did not happen in a vacuum. For centuries, Black lives from the time of American slavery to the present have been defined, regulated, and prosecuted in nearly all aspects of American institutions. Although there were vital turning points in American history at which American institutions sought to right their wrongs against Black people. These institutions harmed Black lives. And behind the veil of democracy and fairness is the reality of a cruel, calculated, antebellum world that held Black people in bondage for centuries, and a present day world that continues to kill Black people in cold blood. Smith's story is America's story and the day-to-day reality of many Black people, even to today. Kendi has a hope in an anti-racist world. I commend him. On a good day, sometimes I have hope too. But how much more powerful would this text be if told by a white person telling his or her journey from racism to anti-racism and urging his allies and friends and family members to do the same? I argue, in essence, that people drive policy, and racist and indifferent people form and sustain racist institutions. It's both the people and the power structure. I hope Kendi's work in this video segment generate meaningful dialogue and reflection. I leave you in this first segment of our discussion in looking at chapters 1 through 6. I leave you with these probing internal questions and 3 final ones for you to consider. Kendi begins his discussion on racism by starting with his own ongoing racist and anti-racist journey. What does it mean for a Black man to begin with his awareness and acknowledgement of racist thoughts, practices, and behaviors to awaken readers to do the same? Does such starting point soften the realities of historical racism in the U.S. and give those who have benefited and continue to benefit from racist policies a soft landing and even a pass? As I read through chapters 1 through 6, I began to ask myself, as a Black, sane, gender-loving woman, are my awareness, acknowledgement, and engagement in anti-racist practices enough to change behavior and help move us towards dismantling the white power structure and anti-Black policies that subjected my forebears and present-day people to discrimination? Or do American institutions themselves, built by racist people who had racist policies in mind, need to be simply torn down and rebuilt by a new generation and perhaps more woke anti-racist people? And my final questions that I offer you in this final segment. I leave this segment with 3 questions that I am asking each of us to ask ourselves. How am I practicing racism or anti-racism? Who and what shaped my journey on this spectrum? How would I roadmap my journey? I am grateful for this opportunity to be with you today. And again, I hope on the other side of all the discussions that are yet to come, it brings you to a place of deep self-reflection, not only about ourselves, but about this country and where we want to land in a more democratic society, in a society that leaves our children better off than when they began on this journey towards racial justice. Have a good day, everyone.